Welcome to Epilepsy Action Australia's special presentation, The Voices Behind the Issue, Medicinal Cannabis. The actual presentation was actually held yesterday, and I started it with some words from the World Health Organization about epilepsy. It is doubtful if there is any other medical condition so universally neglected due to a combination of social stigma, low profile, and lack of resources. It is the world's most common serious brain disorder. Now, with the emergence of medicinal cannabis in a variety of health conditions, the focus has shifted to epilepsy, raising curiosity and awareness of epilepsy, in fact, like no other issue has today. I'm Carol Ireland. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Epilepsy Action Australia. On a personal note, I first discovered the impact of seizures on a family when I was just a young child growing up with an older brother who had epilepsy. In fact, I'm now his primary carer. But still, until I joined Epilepsy Action Australia in 2006, I really didn't have any idea how many people face the challenge of seizures or how complex and varied their needs could be. At the session yesterday, we were delighted to have as our first speaker the Honourable Pru Goward, Minister for Mental Health, Minister for Medical Research, Assistant Minister for Health, amongst other responsibilities. Now, unfortunately, due to technical difficulties, it often happens, we're actually unable to bring you this particular section of the original recording. However, I wanted to report, and in summary, the Minister outlined the New South Wales Government's commitment and their investment in clinical trials to explore the use of cannabis products for children with severe epilepsy. And that will be through a partnership with Sydney Children's Hospital Network. The New South Wales Government has already committed an additional $12 million to the originally allocated $9 million for the trials of medicinal cannabis. Yesterday, the announcement spoke about a specific $3.5 million that would be earmarked for trials involving children with severe medication-resistant epilepsy. And Minister Goward commented that initially she was a sceptic when it came to medicinal cannabis. That was after seeing the effects of recreational use of cannabis in her role as Minister for Mental Health. It was only after meeting with researchers and medical staff that she began to understand the potential therapeutic benefits. Then, hearing the experiences of families of children with severe epilepsy and how desperate parents were for the opportunity to try a treatment that just may work for their child, she became what she called a convert. Minister Goward was determined to secure supplies of the cannabinoid products needed for the clinical trials, and she actually personally flew to London and negotiated an arrangement with GW Pharmaceuticals. There are actually two parts to this arrangement that was announced yesterday that will potentially benefit Australian children. Firstly, an exciting world first in trialling cannabidivarin, or CBDV, in children with medication-resistant epilepsy. Now, the results from early overseas trials of CBDV with adults who have epilepsy have actually shown really promising results. But the paediatric trials in New South Wales will add something new to the body of research already underway internationally, rather than just repeating studies that are already underway in some other country. Secondly, there will be a limited supply of Epidiolex, or cannabidiol CBD, available on a compassionate basis for children who are actually too unwell to participate in the trials of CBDV. Epidiolex is currently in phase 3 trials overseas, so we'd also be a part of that trial. Now, researchers will be designing the first of the trials over coming months and expected to open recruitment in early to mid-2016. This is a New South Wales-based trial, and residents from other states and territories in Australia will need to await further information on potential study hospital sites and local development and involvement. I did want to share this number with you. Further information will be available on the New South Wales trials, and there is a hotline set up, so the Cannabis Trials Helpline, and it is 1-800-217-257. 1-800-217-257. So in essence, Australia's agreement with GW Pharma and our trials will mean that we'll be able to fast track the access to approved medications earlier than we expected, earlier than the 3 to 4 years it usually takes for a medicine to reach the Australian market. The plan, of course, is to have approved drugs listed on the PBS. GW Pharmaceuticals is also planning an international phase 3 clinical trial in 2016 for children with tuberous sclerosis complex, as well as phase 2 clinical trials for children with infantile spasms, and they've indicated their preference for New South Wales to be the state for these trials. After Ms Goward spoke, I congratulated the Minister on her tenacity in achieving the GW Pharma agreement. In fact, they had initially declined a proposal from Australia, and many, including myself, thought that the Minister flying over herself, speaking face to face, would probably not change the situation, but her determination and her obviously strong negotiating skills proved to be to the benefit of children in Australia with epilepsy, and the clinical trials now set to commence earlier than we had thought. Now, you'll now be taken to the rest of the recording that did succeed yesterday without further technical hitch, and I hope you find it really interesting. Thank you. She is, as I said, unrelenting in her stance to raise awareness of medicinal cannabis, and she's also going to introduce us to her son, Jai. Thank you, Michelle.
Did I touch?
No.
Oh golly, I won't touch. It's the first time I've actually prepared a speech. I've done a lot of symposiums, spoken in the media at least 30 times. So today, to try and keep it short, I've written my first speech. So hopefully I'll still be able to make eye contact, but to understand just roughly why this picture is being displayed behind me. That's my son Jai. I know the statement some may not agree with. I believed he is and was legally stoned for 5 years. He was basically on a lot of pharmaceutical products over these 5 years. Majority were high doses. Every single one came with a long list of side effects. This was just the beginning. Every single one of these impacted not only our lives, our children's lives, but made the condition a lot worse. So I just needed that up. As a parent, I stand here before you because epilepsy is soul destroying. It continually takes and it keeps on taking. It is a never-ending grieving process with no known cure. We are one of the 30 to 40% of the epilepsy population that has a child with refractory epilepsy who is also deemed inoperable. Landau-Kleffner syndrome, ESES, CSWS at a spike rate of 3 to 5 seconds, and pseudolenic syndrome, a combination of 3 rare neurological conditions. LKS currently rates as the 7th rarest neurological disease in the world. Aphasia, I prefer to call it childhood dementia. The slate is constantly wiped clean with regression. For days, weeks, months at a time, Jai was non-verbal. Jai did not know who he was, where he was, or how to even perform a simple task, more times than I can remember. Jai has endured every type of seizure and thousands of them. He exhausted all recommended pharmaceutical medications that were told for us as parents to administer. Not one of these pharmaceutical medications ever reduced one seizure. For 5 years, he was legally stoned and addicted to high-dose narcotic pharmaceutical medications. In Queensland, Jai's neurologist stated he was having up to 500 seizures a day. He was described on national TV as being one of the most complex cases his neurologist has ever dealt with. In Victoria, the very first EEG, we were informed by the EMU nurse that she hadn't seen a case like Jai's in over 40 years. Though outdated statistics state Jai may grow out of LKS when he hits puberty, first we need to get him there, and second, what damage is done cannot be reversed. Any seizure at any time could certainly be his last. Jai will always be outside the box. He is complex and his seizures have been brutal and life-threatening. We have performed CPR as have my children. We've experienced resus, we've experienced non-convulsive status, broken bones, smashed teeth, tubes, lines, lead, machines, medications after medications. Hospital became our home for nearly 5 years. December 2014, life spiralled out of control because I believe all Jai had was a heartbeat. With that in mind, I want you to stop and I want you to pause. Mulliways. I don't know how it works, I don't know why it works, but it works. Tony Bauer is Jai's THCA cannabis expert. Lynn Cleaver, Tasmania, is treating her adult son Jeremy with CBD, THC, THCA. The late David Stevens, New South Wales, was treating his daughter Daisha with CBD. We know it works as parents. We see the results. We see it firsthand. We live this. How many more children will die from SEDEP or organ failure from synthetic chemically made pharmaceutical medications between now and the end of these trials? No child with catastrophic refractory epilepsy should be placed on any placebo trial. To rule out whole plant cannabis therapy is simply murderous. If 3 children, 3 different types of epilepsy, using 3 or 4 different types of combinations, we cannot cater one component or one extraction for all. I refer to idiopathic refractory epilepsy as dancing daily with the devil. We simply need to remove the politics from this and bring in the cannabis experts. My son has endured 37 EEGs, AEGs, ERGs, VEGs, and not one has ever showed a reduction in slow sleep spike waves until now. You can try and argue my results. You can't argue, though, with medical evidence. And you can't argue with what I'm about to show you. I want to introduce you to my son, Jai.
I am Jai. I am 11. I live in Brisbane. I was born healthy. In January 2010, I got sick. I have big seizures. The doctor said I have epilepsy. I have 3 rare types. I don't remember not growing up. I was in the hospital a lot. I have a lot of tests. I wanted to go to school, play, and have a lot of fun, but I was too sick. Pills just made me more sick. 35 pills a day. I got a chair with wheels. Food went in a tube to my belly. My head always hurt, and I had to wear a helmet. I have had a lot of ambulance rides, and a lot of people saved my life. One day, My mom said to my doctor that a plant might help me. They laughed, and my mom got sad. My mom didn't sleep much because she had to keep me safe. My mom went on TV a lot with me asking for help. She didn't want me to die. My mom spoke to a lot of important people, but no one listened. But she kept trying, like a lot of our friends. A lot of kids like me die every day from pills that didn't work. My life began in December 2014. My head started hurting. I woke up. I feel so good. I can talk. I can walk. I can eat. I can play. I can write. I can now read. I am alive. Cannabis medicine helped me stay alive. Only Bella made my medicine. He cared about me. I am seizure-free now. My mom and I are removed. That shit is crazy. I am 11. I want the law to be changed so everyone can be healthy like me.
I think there's not too much for me to say. Michelle and Jai Whitelaw. Does anyone have any questions of Michelle? I think she's willing.
Michelle, you were initially very reluctant to take on cannabis.
Absolutely.
With the benefit of hindsight,
Yeah.
what's your advice to these people here?
Don't wait. I've said it many times, but I was reluctant because my husband is employed through the federal government. So I have 2 sick children. Most people only concentrate on Jai, but I also have a 16-year-old with type 1 diabetes, congenital heart, and the list goes on and on. So, I have adult children also that work in the health industry. So we had a lot, but at the end of the day, I believe that, we were running out of time. There was no other medications. What do? I sat on the couch for 2 days and I've said this time and time again, and I thought, do I kill him and kill myself? It was that real, because I didn't want to continue. I did not want to see him suffer or break the law and be a criminal and risk. And you know what? I have no regrets. No regrets at all. It's 320 days. We've seen 4 seizures. I don't know if he's having subclinical seizures anymore, but now he's back at school. He can write for the first time in 18 months. He's got his first academic report. The school support us, the doctor. I begged our family doctor to report us to docs because I didn't want it hanging over my head. But you know what? No one will report me. And God help them if they do, because I have all the video evidence I have. For 5 years I've been documenting Jai's journey. I've contacted every federal health minister, state minister, premiers all around Australia. For 3 years I've been fighting this.
4 of our mothers have been investigated by docs.
Yep.
And in all cases, docs and the police.
Yep.
And in all cases, they backed away, saying the greater good was by leaving the status quo.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
but I've been one of the very few parents that have been in the media, like Shree O'Connell. They're on Mulloway's, 2 children, 2 years seizure-free, Dravet syndrome. Hello? And Lynn Cleaver in Tasmania. She's growing her own and been to the police. I've been on the TV with the police minister, the police commissioner, everyone, and, I have I begged for 12 months. I didn't want to break the law. I didn't want to break the law. Someone help me. No one listened. And that's why I thought, you know what, he's going to die. If I don't break the law, I, as a duty of care as a mother, have failed him. So, you know, no regrets. I think if you can do it, do it. Who knows the time frame for these trials? But I think that, you know, the research is so exciting. You know, I don't condone what I'm doing, but my decision was right because my son is alive. And I have no regrets for that. So,
Other questions?
yeah.
How much is it?
Free. All they ask is me to document. Tony Bauer only caters to young children. My son is 11. So adult children, I wanted to ask the minister because I was a bit confused in regards to we've had SAS authority scripts and stuff, but you know, these trials should not discriminate adults. You know, my girlfriend Lynn Cleaver, well, she's been a mum that's been following us for 5 years. Her son Jeremy is the same age as my adult son, who's 25. You know, he from the age of 6, she has done more, been through a hell of a lot more than what our family has, but I've watched my teenage daughter perform CPR till the paramedics arrived. You know, but she deals with this still. He's not seizure free. She grows her own using all different types of components, trying to be the scientist. We shouldn't have to be his parents. We shouldn't, you know, but she couldn't wait. He's an adult. So.
One more question after that.
Yeah, I noticed you're giving your son epilin, and I think there was clobazam in there.
Oh yeah, they're all old meds. We're just down on low dose epilin now.
Yeah, so my daughter's currently on those, and we're not seeing any sort of improvement.
Yep.
I'm very interested to try the oil, but I have
Yep.
no idea on
Yep.
the dosage.
I highly recommend do your research for, you know, for at least 18 months before I took it. I made sure Jai was off his steroids. I made sure he was off his benzos. I made sure he was off Valium because he was all high doses. And depending on what element or what component you're looking at, if you're able to test it and find out anyway, a lot of those can interact, but then a lot of, they're finding now with the latest research overseas that some CBD products with an extra letter on the end can actually help with the weaning of benzos. So a lot of kids die, you just can't wean these meds.
What dosage do you use?
Yeah, Jai, we use it, Mulliways comes in 2 types. It's ethanol and hemp seed. I believe the hemp seed alone has got nutritional value. It's high in omega-3, 6 and 9, a lot stronger than any fish oil. I'm just using a couple of drops in the morning. During the daytime, it's ethanol, soaked in gummy bears, so he just eats a gummy bear. And at night time, that hemp seed oil also aids with sleep. So our problem is Jai can only do half days at school because he needs a dose halfway through the day, and the school can't administer. The school all knows 1,200 children at that school, over 100 teachers, and they all support. They've all seen Jai for the last nearly 5 years. We didn't think he'd be going back to school.
So just a couple of drops?
Yeah, a couple of, it's just the same as other medicine.
We might need to hold there.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, thank you.
We might need to hold there just to get through our presentations, and perhaps there'll be an opportunity for people to talk afterwards. I think you'll agree Michelle is an extremely courageous person, and certainly a mother with great passion and made personal decisions. As I said earlier, there are many perspectives, and as you heard Michelle say, there is a parent's choice. We also need the science, so it shouldn't be one approach against another. I think this is the thing where we all should be moving in the same direction here. Which brings me to our final presentation. Some of you may recall that a very large amount of money, I think it was $33.7 million, was donated by the Lambert family to Sydney University. The Lambert Initiative is providing a platform for extensive clinical and scientific cannabinoid-related research, drawing on expertise from the researchers from the University of Sydney and their partners throughout throughout the world. We've got two of the lead researchers here to present with us today. In fact, we have a number of them here today, so welcome to all of you. I can see the front row. Welcome to all of you. But speaking today, Professor Ian McGregor. Ian is an international leader in cannabinoid research for more than 20 years. An impressive background as a psychopharmacologist, investigating medicinal chemistry, drug development, novel psychoactive drugs, analytical toxicology, I can almost not say these things, Ian, behavioural ecology, preclinical psychopharmacology and human clinical trials.
That's huge.
Ian was appointed the preclinical director of the Lambert Initiative for cannabinoid therapeutics earlier this year. I'd love to introduce to you Clinical Associate Professor Nicholas Lintzeris, a leading addiction medicine specialist and researcher working in the drug and alcohol field for over 20 years. He's an expert in clinical trial design, drug policy and regulatory issues, and lead investigator on a clinical trial of Sativex, an oral spray containing cannabinoids as a treatment for cannabis dependence. I'm sure you'll agree they're very well qualified to be leading this important initiative. Epilepsy Action Australia is very proud to be collaborating with you, and I'll ask you to please come up.
Thanks, Carol.
Well, good day, everyone. It's lovely to be here, and I'd like to thank Carol for the invitation. Now, when I advance my slides, do I press?
Just the down.
Oh, the down
the,
button.
Okay. No, the other one on
Oh,
the side.
Other one.
Yeah. There we go.
There we go. Yeah. So, if you're interested in the Lambert Initiative, I'll give you a bit of background today, but this is our website at the University of Sydney, and there's a very interesting story, I guess, that goes back to November of last year when Lucy Haslam, who you may have seen in Australian Story last week, organised a symposium for medicinal cannabinoids, and it was opened by the Premier, Mike Baird, and Nick and Dave and myself went up to Tamworth for this event, which was really very interesting, and it came about, I'm sure you know Lucy's story, because her son Dan had stage 4 bowel cancer and found that cannabis was the only thing that relieved his pain and extreme nausea. An incredible story. And Mike Baird, and I'd actually like to credit the New South Wales government for their amazing support and leadership nationally in the medicinal cannabis space. And this was exemplified at this very early stage in November of last year with the Premier actually opening this conference on the medicinal cannabinoids. And we went up and spoke a little bit about the science of the endocannabinoid system of the brain and how some of the cannabis-based medications might work. And we met Michael Lambert up there, who some of you may know, who's the father of Kaitlyn, who suffers from Dravet syndrome. And Kaitlyn was having many, many seizures every day, was really struggling. And they found that the use of cannabidiol, CBD, gave excellent control over her seizures. And they were importing this from Denmark. And there's many stories like this. They were breaking the law. They were desperate to find something that would help Kaitlyn. And indeed, with CBD, with this preparation called Indoca, Kaitlyn was able to go to Kindy, which is just an amazing thing for their family to see her to be able to be well enough to go to Kindy. So very, very passionate about cannabinoids. And when we met Michael, we had a bit of a yarn with him, and a couple of weeks later he called Dave Alsop here and said, by the way, my father is a very high net worth individual, and we'd like to support research into medicinal cannabinoids, and would you be interested in meeting Dad? And Mum as well, Joy Lambert, who's a formidable character, a great woman. And we, through many discussions with them, we hatched a scheme to set up an initiative at the University of Sydney for the study of the medicinal cannabinoids. And it was indeed $33.7 million that they donated. It was an incredible act of generosity, and for us, an awesome responsibility to prosecute this mission to really lead not only New South Wales and Australia, but the world, if we can, in the study of medicinal cannabinoids. It's an incredible opportunity. These things very rarely happen to scientists. Normally, we're trying to win the Nobel Prize with a matchbox and an elastic band. And, you never usually get everything that you ask for, so this is an incredible development for us. And our major aim is to develop new cannabinoid-based medications for the treatment of a range of diseases. Now, Barry Lambert was extremely generous. He said, although Kaitlyn obviously has Dravet, and our primary interest is epilepsy, we believe that cannabinoid-based medications can be of assistance for a whole range of human suffering. And so we didn't want to limit our research scope simply to epilepsy. So we have interests in pain and cancer, dementia, mental illness, addictions, and metabolic disorders as well. So we're very broad-ranging. What is this based on? Well, it's based on the realization that everyone is walking around with cannabinoids in their brain. We all have this endocannabinoid system in our brain and our body. And we still don't teach kids that go through medical school about this system. It's that new. But the endocannabinoid system underpins just about every physiological process you can think of. It's in your skin, it's in your fat, it's in your brain, it's in your blood, it's in your immune system. It regulates all these processes, and we're really just at the beginning of understanding this endocannabinoid system. If you look in the brain, what is the most common receptor in your brain? It's the cannabinoid receptor, the one that interacts with these cannabis-like molecules, the endocannabinoids in our brains. And one of the most important things that system does is regulate neuronal excitability. So the endocannabinoids calm the brain down when it's too excited, and they can also bring it up when it's too inhibited as well. They regulate the tone, the electrical tone of the brain. And you might be starting to see the connection with epilepsy now. And we're starting to realize that some forms of epilepsy and vulnerability to epilepsy is associated with dysregulation of this endocannabinoid system. And we also realize that a number of other ailments that humans suffer from, schizophrenia, dementia, pain, can also be linked to deficits in the endocannabinoid system. So how do you actually, alter these this endocannabinoid system? Well, there's a whole range of receptors that you can trigger artificially through medications that can restore balance and equilibrium to that system. And these endocannabinoids work on a range of receptors that we can use plant-based cannabinoids and also synthetic cannabinoids to also regulate, so we can restore balance to that system when it's out of regulation. You may not realize, but this medication, which I'm sure everyone in the room has tried at some stage, how does that work? That works on your endocannabinoid system. Panadol actually regulates endocannabinoids in your brain to relieve pain. That's how ubiquitous, that's how important your endocannabinoids are. Yet we're just starting to learn how this system works. So what about the cannabis plant? Well, it's a very complex beastie. There's incredible medicinal potential in there, but we're just the same as the endocannabinoid system of the brain and body. We're just in a way starting to learn about this potential within the plant. There's more than 100 different cannabinoids in the plant, and a lot of them have the abbreviations THC, CBD, THCV. I call them the bad scrabbles because, you can see, could you actually get a triple word score and 50 points out of any of these? Perhaps not. But maybe if someone left an A and a triple, yeah, you never know. But there's an incredible therapeutic potential, not just with the really well-known ones like THC and CBD, but in the other 100 that we don't really know much about. There could be the cure for cancer. There could be something amazing for epilepsy. There could be the next big drug for pain. So this is a really exciting frontier in pharmacology. THC, we know, is the one that gets you stoned. It's the main intoxicant for some conditions. It might be the best medicine. We can actually get THC capsules prescribed in Australia. The drug dronabinol contains THC and it's used for pain and for chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting. But there's a whole lot of other cannabinoids that might actually be better therapies. So most of you will know about CBD, cannabidiol. It's strongly anticonvulsant. That's what Epidiolex is. We also know it's strongly antipsychotic. If you give CBD to people with schizophrenia, it seems as effective as standard antipsychotics in reducing their psychotic symptoms, yet it doesn't have the side effects associated with antipsychotic drugs like Zyprexa and Seroquel. It also seems to be neuroprotective as well, so it protects the brain from damage. It's a wonder drug in a way, CBD. As far as we know, it's not intoxicating at all. And you will have heard of Epidiolex, which is basically a 98% CBD extract. Phase 3 clinical trials underway in the USA. My colleague Nick will talk about the preliminary outcomes of these trials in a minute. The one that was announced today is CBDV. cannabidivarin, and you've got to practice that. You know, it's a tricky one to say. I just do it in front of the mirror 50 times every night. But interestingly, if you look at I know you're all chemists here, so you'll follow me. But anyway, if you look at CBDV versus CBD, they're very, very similar molecules. It's just this wee squiggly chain at the end is actually shorter in CBDV compared to CBD. We're still trying to work out the exact difference between CBD and CBDV, but that small chemical difference could make a huge therapeutic difference. And I actually scientifically think it's very exciting that the trial announced today is for CBDV rather than CBD. We're actually going to learn something really important with this trial. It's not a Me Too trial, it's a chance to define a whole new medication for epilepsy. Very exciting indeed. Sorry, going backwards here. Just a couple more slides.
Yes.
Now, cannabis is not cannabis. A couple of years ago, we worked, Jonathan Arnold and the New South Wales Drug Squad worked with my lab. That is the drug squad. That's them dropping off the stash at the lab. We wanted to work out what the cannabinoid content of local Australian street cannabis is. And what we found was that it's full of THC, about 15% by weight is THC, so that's intoxicating stuff. But the goodies, your CBD, your CBDV, almost non-existent. So most of the samples we could barely detect CBD, the anticonvulsant, in there, the one that's antipsychotic. And this actually means that there's a concern that high THC, no CBD will mean that the cannabis has very low therapeutic potential that tends to predispose to addiction and to mental health problems. So we need much better cannabis out there if we're going to use it for therapeutic purposes. And this is a beware, I think, for people that are treating epileptic children or friends or family, that the street cannabis may not be the stuff to go for. It's an important lesson. Now, the Hunter Valley is very famous for its wine. You've probably been up there, but you may not know that it's also famous for this. This is industrial hemp that is grown by a company called Ecofibre just outside Singleton in the Hunter Valley. And Dave Alsop and myself went up there recently to meet Phil Warner, who's the CEO of Ecofibre. There's me having a bit of fun with some of their product. When you look at it, by contrast with Australian street cannabis, you find that it's full of goodies. There's hardly any THC, 0.5%, 3.56% CBD, but also CBDA, which is the precursor of CBD in the plant. More than 10% by weight is CBDA, and you can convert that CBDA to CBD just by heating the plant material. So we've got a very rich local source of heavy CBD containing plant material, and also some CBDV in that local source as well. And I think that is very interesting. One of the things we want to do is to try and develop a homegrown supply of cannabinoids to develop our therapeutics with. And meeting Phil and knowing that that growing's going on up there is very exciting, and we're going to work with him on extractions and how to get the cannabinoids out of that hemp to develop therapeutics. Just a couple of extra slides and I'll finish up and hand you over to Nick. What else are we working at relative to epilepsy? Well, we're working at a very basic cellular level to try and understand how cannabinoids interface with different types of epilepsy. So we all know that CBD can be very, very useful. We know that CBDV can be very useful, but mechanistically, we're not quite sure how they're doing that in the brain. And when you have mechanism, it helps to convince doctors and clinicians to prescribe cannabinoids. They like to know how something works. So we work at that very, very basic level and to try and work out the mechanistic effects of cannabinoids in epilepsy. And we do that we've got machines where we can express targets in particular cells. We can take our cannabinoids, feed them through this machine and work out hits against particular receptors, against particular channels. Some of you will know that certain types of epilepsy are associated with specific genetic mutations in sodium channels, in calcium channels, in GABA receptors, glycine receptors. We can stick all of them in our machine and see whether cannabinoids, the whole 104 cannabinoids, if we like, are modulating the activity at these receptors. That's a very fast way of trying to mechanistically understand the effects of cannabinoids in epilepsy. We can also do what's called patch clamping electrophysiology in live brain slices to look at the same thing. This is in kind of artificial receptors. This is looking in actual brain slices. And we can also use mice that have particular genetic mutations. So for example, Jonathan Arnold, who's here today, has a Dravet mouse that has the same mutation in the sodium channel that you get in about 70 to 80% of kids with Dravet syndrome. And we can test our cannabinoids in these mice. So basic science gives us some incredibly powerful tools to mechanistically understand what cannabinoids are doing, while at the same time our work in plant science and in chemistry can help bring a pipeline forward where multiple cannabinoids can be tested against these targets. Just mentioned Jonathan Arnold over here, who's doing a lot of our preclinical work. Jordan Stewart, who's an incredibly talented American researcher who's recently joined the Lambert Initiative. She's an expert on endocannabinoids and high throughput screening. That also proves that we're not just all blokes, we're a bit blokish in the Lambert Initiative. I also want to mention Michael Bowen, who's an outstanding young scientist. 2 weeks ago, and he's working for us in the Lambert Initiative, 2 weeks ago, he was given the New South Wales Early Career Researcher of the Year award from Premier Mike Baird and from the Chief Scientist, Mary O'Kane. So part of what we're doing in the Lambert Initiative is trying to get the best brains in the business to come and work with us and prosecute this really important research that will hopefully put our state and our country at the forefront of medicinal cannabinoid research. I'll now hand over to my colleague Nick Litzeris to tell you a little bit about our clinical and regulatory activities.
Which one for Dan? So thank you. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Carol, for the invite today, and thank you all for attending. I'm going to really sort of walk through a bit of a journey about how do we go from understanding science to actually ending up with medicines available that your doctors will prescribe. Because I think that's the missing link. Did anyone see Q&A last night? Is that last night? Yeah. So last night there was a question of a parent with a child, didn't say if it was a boy or a girl, can't remember, with epilepsy. They've been using medicinal cannabis for some time. The question was to a group of politicians, so what's going on and how are we going to make that happen? And every politician in the room pretty much said, look, I don't understand how or why, but let's just sort this out, can we? Can we just make this happen? So I think what you're seeing is a lot of goodwill from politicians that we need something to happen, and so why is it taking so long? And that really then needs to understand what is the journey for how we get medicines licensed in this country and to a certain degree in any other country. So generally in Australia, if a medicine's to be licensed, generally what happens is the drug company that has developed the medicine or is making the medicine will go to the TGA, which is an arm of the federal government, with their application where they want to then go and apply for a medicine for a particular condition. So medicines are not just licensed willy-nilly, it's for a specific condition that you license it for. And generally they need to turn up with 3 boxes worth of data. The first thing is just what is this medicine that you're actually wanting to license? So that's the details about the composition, what's in it. Not just what's the active ingredients, but tell us about all the other stuff that goes in it. The binding, the chalk, the colorants, all those things that, so for every tablet or pill or syrup or whatever it is, tell us what's in your product. Then demonstrate that it is stable. And what we mean by that is you can put it on the shelf in the pharmacy and come back to it 6 months later and it still will be what it was 6 months ago, or 12 months or 2 years. So most medicines will have a shelf life, so you have to then go and test stability, because you've got a medicine that you're taking today, you want to make sure that it's going to work, that the use-by date isn't expired. And then we also have there's a bunch of issues around safety of the medicine. So a lot of this then is around bacterial safety. So how do you know that medicine is not contaminated in the manufacturing process and so forth? There's a range of plant-based medicines that get used throughout medicine, and that's often an issue with plant-based medicine, is looking at some of the, how is it being grown? Are there fungicides? Is there heavy metals in the processing and so forth? So there's a range of a lot of data that the company needs to produce. Another thing is also that by the stability, is in the product, in the batch you've made this month, is it going to be identical to the batch you're making next month, and the month after that, and the month after that? So a lot of that is about the stability of the product. So what is the medicine you're wanting to license? Then the question of, is it safe in the patients you want to use it in? And that generally then is looking at, show us your data, show us your evidence of side effects in the population you want to use the medication in. So that generally means they have to go and do what they call safety studies, where they give the medicine to a large number of people over a long period of time. As we all know, many of the conditions we now treat are chronic conditions. They go on for many, many, many years. And yet most of the studies that look at whether or not something works usually only runs for a few months. So in epilepsy trials, most of the medicines, the high quality evidence, the studies that have been done, generally are short-term trials of a matter of months. And yet we use these medicines for years. So there's a separate bunch of questions that have to be addressed about the safety of the medicine in the person you're using it in. But there's also queries about issues around what we call teratogenicity. So if a person was taking the medicine and they, for example, felt pregnant whilst taking the medicine, will there be some side effects or harms for the children that are born? And big focus of this came out of the medicine that we remember in the 50s with thalidomide. It was a morning sickness medicine given to pregnant women to control their nausea. Unfortunately, because we didn't have the regulatory framework back then, there ended up being that catastrophic story because of that. And then there's the question of, does the medicine work? And that, in science language, that's efficacy. Now, the way that scientists, doctors and scientists really, the only real way to demonstrate efficacy is this thing called a placebo-controlled study. And that is essentially, some people get randomized, that's a random process. Some people, toss of the coin, get the active medicine, other people get a placebo, a sugar pill, and then basically the comparison is looking at the two groups. And the reason that's done is because in most medical conditions that are complex, there's often numerous factors, lots of kind of variations that can affect whether or not medicine works. And because on the whole we largely don't understand most of those factors. And so the way we the way we deal with that is by setting up these large randomized controlled trials. And you basically hope that the process of randomization factors out all those other variables. So some people have a more severe condition, some people may have got an illness earlier than others, some people may have a genetic predisposition, some people might have other medical problems, be on other medicines and so forth. So the randomized design trial is the way that the regulators, that's the design they rely on to be able to say, yep, this medicine works or it doesn't work. So that's what needs to happen to get a medicine license. This is normally a 5 to 10 year process to make that happen, if you're starting from scratch. We're not starting from scratch though. So, you've heard a lot about CBD. So CBD is the front runner when we're thinking about the medicines that are being developed up, cannabinoids that are being developed up, not just for epilepsy, but for some other indications as well. So, where are we with CBD? What's the evidence say? So if you're going to go and look at all the studies that have been done in the world, if the drug company went and got those studies and then took them to the TGA, so look, we want to license this drug, where are they up to? And basically the data we have, we'll look at sort of what the randomised trials say in a moment, but most of the studies to date have been what we call survey research, studies or case series. So the first published study looking at CBD-based products was actually conducted by a scientist who also was a mother with a child with epilepsy. So she had her own personal interest. in doing this research. And it was a well-conducted little study of 19 families with children with severe epilepsy taking CBD-enriched cannabis extracts. So these were not necessarily, it wasn't one medicine. These were using the various products that are available on the American market, and we'll look at some of those in a moment. And this is what she reported. 2 children became seizure-free out of the 19, and 8 had a marked reduction. So over half the children, the parents were, and the scientists doing the research were able to turn around and say, look, that was a significant improvement in over half the children. But it didn't work for all the children. Now, was that a one-off, or what else have we seen? What happened in Colorado with the legalization of cannabis when did that happen? Last year? One of the things that happened was a huge influx from families from all over America with children with epilepsy who weren't able to source medicines in their own jurisdiction, their own states, all converged into Colorado as soon as the laws got changed. So the hospital in Colorado went from having 5 kids with Dravet's to all of a sudden being inundated with dozens of children and families from all across the country. So they weren't ready for it. They weren't ready to do sort of fancy research designs and so forth. But what they did do was just document, what's been the experience of the families who are turning up and using the products that they can buy over the counter in Colorado. So many of these products are the products such as Charlotte's Web, that some of you may have heard of on the media. So, and have to emphasise, none of these were prescribed medicines. These were all what we're calling the extracts that are available over the counter in America. And basically what they found was that what the doctors were describing, that in conversations with the children, with the family, that about a third of the children had a marked reduction by more than 50%. That's about 1 in 3. If you're in that 1 in 3 group, then that's clearly a huge advantage. But still, it was 2 in 3 did not have that 50% change, which often in epilepsy language is that kind of has something worked or not. When they did some EEGs, they only were able to do EEGs in 8 children before they started the medicine, and then looked at it again after the medicine. There were no differences in the EEGs that they were able to report. And this one, now this is interesting because this is an open label safety study of Epidiolex. So Epidiolex is the medicine that GW, the CBD-based medicine that GW have been producing and are going to trials. They have done an open label safety study, which means no randomisation, everyone got the medicine, and they were treated as best as they could by the doctors treating them. 137 patients who got at least 12 weeks of the Epidiolex, and overall there was a median reduction, of around 54%. And the kind of feedback we've heard from the people running the research is around a third of the patients had the 50% reduction. So again, what that tells us is it's going to work for some people, but not for everyone. Now, where are we up to in terms of the evidence for epilepsy if a company went tomorrow to license it for the TGA? And in summary, basically there's a thing in medicine called the Cochrane Review, which is basically, if you ever want to know where are we up to, state of the art for the well-conducted studies, you go to a Cochrane Review. And they have a methodology which they use for every medical condition. So you can do a Cochrane Review on any condition, and it's basically what's the science tell us today. And they only look at the randomised controlled trials. They're not interested in the open label studies, the case series and so forth. They are strictly limited to RCTs. Because that's kind of the information you need to license in medicine. And this is their conclusion. The conclusion is the data isn't there at the moment. But there are 2 large trials of CBD currently underway in the US of the Epidiolex product, and we expect these studies to be reporting by early to mid next year. And at the moment, no one knows what these studies are showing. So you may sort of hear from people, the studies in America, the randomised trials are showing. No one knows. These studies are blinded. No one knows until they actually, unblind the study at the end of the project. So we're waiting to see just what, will the CBD reach the standard that then groups such as the FDA in America or the TGA here in Australia will then turn around and say, we've got the data to tell us that, that we can actually sort of complete the whole circle and then license the medicine. Is any cannabinoid product licensed for epilepsy? Because you'll hear a lot of things about, it's licensed in America and it's licensed in Europe. There is no cannabinoid product licensed anywhere in the world by a medical regulator for the indication of epilepsy at this point in time. What is happening in the US is kind of a bit of a loophole where in the US hemp oil is legal. So as Ian just pointed out, you can grow hemp with high CBD. You can even fortify it and put other things in it, other cannabinoids, like pour in some extra CBD or throw in some other cannabinoids. And it's legal in the US and it's legal in most parts of Europe. So many of these products that are being sold by the Americans, such as Charlotte Sweden and a bunch of other ones, are not licensed as pharmaceutical medicinal products. They are actually sold as a food. In Australia, there's an application at the moment about should hemp oil be available in Australia as a food. So that's currently working through its way. To give you an issue, foods don't get regulated particularly well. They're food. They're not medicine. So a recent study done by the FDA, where they went and just got 18 samples from around the US, from companies that were saying, selling their products as CBD-rich products, food, but CBD-rich. And they went and basically analysed them and found that 14 of those 18 products actually had no CBD in it, or so negligible that it actually is kind of, not. And why? Because they don't have to regulate, because it's a food, it's not a medicine. And some of them, unfortunately, actually had high THC levels in there. So, what are we doing in New South Wales, and how did our research agenda announced today fit in with where we're moving towards? So remember, the main medication that around the world is CBD. It's not the only one that we're interested in. So, for example, some of the products being sold in Australia are not necessarily high CBD products. There's some other cannabinoids in there as well. So, we aren't proposing to do the CBD study in Australia because by the time we set that up, the Americans would be reporting. It would be kind of a waste of time, and it would be a little bit unethical to actually subject patients to a study when the Americans are about to reveal those findings by the time we set those studies up. So in Australia, in New South Wales, the main study of an investigational product is CBDV. And that's the one that, especially the animal models, the animal research is telling us, gee, that's the next most promising cannabinoid coming out of the lab. And where's that going to fit in? Well, it could work better than CBD, but certainly, we just saw before, only maybe a third to half of the children actually respond to CBD-based products. So what are you going to do with the other half to 2/3? Is that it? Do you give up? Oh, well, CBD didn't work. Well, no, and that's why, in many respects, what we're doing is we're at the beginning of this journey. CBD will have much better information within 12, 18 months, and then the Australian trials will be the first ones running with CBDV. There is currently a study of CBDV underway in the US for adults with epilepsy, with focal epilepsy. The other thing, obviously, that as Minister Goward announced, we also are interested in implementation trials of Epidiolex. So should it work, should the Americans demonstrate it works, then the trick is how do we fast track that into Australia? But you can hear from what I'm saying, these are all 12, 18 months away before they're available, either as, the trials might start a little bit earlier, but before CBD, the evidence was through, and we're talking about at least 12 months away. So what happens in the meantime? So, Does that mean you can do nothing until then? Well, there's options. One option is there's hundreds, if not thousands, we don't quite know. There are hundreds of families currently in Australia that are turning to producers of cannabis products that are illegal, but as we've heard today, there are families doing it now. We also understand that the police have really given up the challenge of trying to prosecute. But we all know at the same time, that's not a satisfactory position we're in. I mean, Michelle just described, her son needs a dose in the afternoon, but because it's an illicit substance, she can't have it given by the school nurse like every other kid having their asthma med. If you are taking these artisanal products and you end up in hospital, the doctors and nurses probably won't let you take the medicine because it's not allowed within the hospital because it's not a medicine. So there's all these barriers and there's all these problems with this current state of play. Uncertainty in the products. There are some reputable, artisanal producers out there, but it's hard to standardise these products time after time after time without having the big laboratories. So we can keep doing, families can keep resorting to their current options. There is also, though, a lot of people are doing work to look at, can we set up compassionate access programs? Michelle spoke about the special access program. We would love to set up a special access program. The difficulty is, most of the manufacturers in the US who make their CBD products do not want to engage with a medicinal regulatory framework. Changes the whole equation for them back home. And also it's illegal for them to export a cannabinoid-based product from the US. So there's all these issues and barriers. It's not just as easy as ringing up, the Stanley brothers in Colorado and say, can you ship over some Charlotte's Web because we want to start a trial. We've tried that. We haven't given up, but, there's work underway seeing, can we make these frameworks work? Clinical trials are probably the easiest way, and it is possible to set up a safety study of a medicine that does not require randomised trials and so forth. It is possible to do. Again, we just need to be able to have a product which is stable, hasn't got fungicides, hasn't got lead in it, hasn't got alcohol, hasn't got a whole range of things that stable, that we can actually just get it through a clinical trial process. And we're keen to look at how that might be possible to do. So we haven't given up hope. The other thing we are doing here in Australia is actually setting up the Pelican Project. The Pelican Project is an initiative done by us at Sydney Uni, the Lambert Initiative, also working with Epilepsy Action Australia, with consumers and also some of the leading neurologists from New South Wales and Victoria, because we actually want to explore just what is the experience of families that are using medicinal cannabis products for epilepsy. Because we've heard some stories, but there's a lot of other stories out there. It's important that we actually understand what these families are going through, what's the decision-making processes. Because we want to talk not just to the families that have gone down this track who are using the cannabinoids, we also want to talk to the families that have used the cannabinoids and no longer are, because again, it doesn't work for everyone. And we want to understand from them, so what happened? What did you try? At what point in time did you think this isn't quite right for us? And we also want to talk to families who never have used cannabinoids and to try to understand, so what are the issues for you guys? Like, what is it that you would need to understand whether or not you should be making this leap forward or not? The other thing we want to do is actually go and test some of the products. So we also want families that are using their products to actually give us samples so we can do the lab analysis to see just what is in these products that different families are using. Because again, because of the illicit nature of cannabis in this country, it's actually not legally possible for a manufacturer to take it to the lab or for a family member to take their sample to the lab and have it legally analysed. So, that's just because cannabis has been illegal. So we've actually got to get all these exemptions to do this research, and we're working through those processes. We are aiming to be able to get this up and running. There's a whole bunch of all these regulatory issues we need to get through sorted to be able to handle cannabis products legally, so the families don't end up in trouble and that we don't end up in trouble and so forth. And we're aiming, hopefully we should be having that up and running, and Epilepsy Action Australia will be one avenue to find out about when is that study ready to start. Look, I think I've probably spoken longer than I should have. Sorry. Some of us get carried away when we talk about these things, and you can see why. But if there is time, I'm more than happy to field questions. And I think Ian also likewise. So I think you've got questions of science or process. You know, I'm not sure how long you've got, Carol, but we're free.
And Nick, you mentioned, or Ian mentioned, that because the endocannabinoid system is so new, it's not even talked about in medical school. In fact, it's been known about for 20 years, and it's been left off the curriculum for fear of broadening the minds of those in it. Do you think the lives of the children in this group, especially, and many other groups of illnesses, are too important to be left in the hands of cannabis deniers who've held our work back for 20 years? Remember, our first application to grow CBD was in 1990. So we've wasted 25 years in this country. They have the temerity to talk about us being at the forefront. We're in the backwater of science and politics and compassion. So why should the doctors control? Since Dean Natale's bill was shot down by Turnbull, remember, a merchant banker, right? And the control of the cannabis has gone to the Federal Department of Health rather than an independent body. Can you see that as a positive step?
So I think there are about 7 questions in that. I'll try to go through as many of them as I can remember. So it's a relatively, well, it's not a new system. It's been around since rats were born.
No, it's been around since C-squares.
So the cannabinoids, we are all manufacturing cannabinoids as we sit here today. So we're all actually making our own cannabinoids. You may or may not know that, but we're all kind of breaking the law as we sit here.
It's not a conspiracy, Paul. I mean, really, I think that it's a system that's very rapidly evolving in terms of our knowledge. And, you know, having taught university courses over decades, you tend to, you know, get your old slides and do a minor mod and give the same lecture year after year after year. So it's kind of a legacy thing in a way that a very good medical educator will keep up to date with this. But the reason we're up to date is that we get on the plane and we go to the International Cannabinoid Research Society, the International Association for Cannabinoids in Medicine. You have to work really hard. So I don't think it's a conspiracy theory. I think it's an education thing. I think when it comes to the Lambert Initiative, one of our major principles is outreach and education, particularly of the medical profession and also the community.
But I actually think
the irony is Lambert's child is receiving CBD because he's got the money to go and buy it, right? With that $30 million, with 1% of that, we could effectively treat much more than half of the intractable epilepsy sufferers, and do the first part, we can screen out the CBD non-responders. I'm getting about 3 in 10 CBD non-responders. They could be streamlined to your CBDV group then, if we're living in a real world and not having some...
I think everyone recognises the work that you do, Andrew, and how long you've been doing that work and how courageous.
But how little has been achieved compared to how much could be
don't you
achieved?
feel that at the moment we're now at a watershed where things are really starting to happen? I mean, the announcement today, what's happening at a federal level, I really think that
I think many of us
you're
would
going
be
to be
thinking
vindicated.
12 months ago, would we be where we are here in Australia? I mean, Michelle, you've been on this case. You know,
You're missing the critical and the critical question was, Richard D. Natale provided a bill for a creation of an independent Office of Medical Cannabis. Turnbull, the merchant banker, has shot that down and grabbed control of medical cannabis to the Federal Department of Health. Hang on,
well,
the Federal Department of Health has twice blocked our application even on hemp seed foods, going back to 2002.
I think we need a fact check about
I'm just very conscious that other people may have some questions, and we can't revisit the past and change the past. So can we ask if anyone else has questions?
Yeah, see, there's a lot of talk about CBD, CBDV, but as Michelle was saying, her son's taking Maloways, and that doesn't have CBD, that's THCA. Is there studies, actually, trials being done?
Maloways has CBDA in it, which is a precursor of CBD, as well as THCA. I take your point. THCA has a lot of potential, I think, as an anticonvulsant, but it's completely unstudied. And we'll be putting it through our screening process, as I described, as one of our top priorities. We think it's a very, very exciting molecule. It's non-psychoactive. The one difficulty with THCA, if you brought it onto market, is if you heat it above 160 degrees, you get pure THC. And you know, just about every teenager in the land, I'm sure, would learn that on the internet within, within a day of release. And then, so you do have regulatory hurdles to cross with THCA, which trouble us to a certain extent.
So the reason we're studying CBD, CBDA more CBD more is because of the regulatory hurdles, not because that one...
No, it's because THCA hasn't been studied in anticonvulsants.
Sorry, I've got another
Clinical
question.
importance. Yeah.
Another question here. Yes?
I just wanted to find out a little bit more about the Pelican project and who do we contact to put our hands up to say we want to be a part of that.
Yeah, so I think
I'd like to give some whatever info you need. Like, this is so exciting.
so
Any office.
yes,
I think there's a Lambert Initiative email. So Lambert Initiative, if you go to the website
Okay.
on the University of Sydney, you'll see a general inquiries email for the contact part. If you, I think I'm not out of order suggesting this, that we that you just log your interest in being part of
Yes, just
Pelican
following
through
the
that email,
research.
and we'd love to have everyone who's interested in participating. I mean, we think it's an amazing opportunity with Epilepsy Action Australia to do an excellent study. I mean, there's been surveys done in the past. This one will be different because it will include chemical analysis for those people who are actually using products. We can screen for 12, maybe 15 different cannabinoids. And what's really exciting there is that it actually helps us in our therapeutic mission, because if your child is responding really well to a particular cannabinoid medication, and we know it contains, for example, high levels of THCA or CBDV, then we can start to look at the therapeutic benefits of different cannabinoid mixtures. There's more than 2,000 different strains of cannabis, and they all have wildly different levels of cannabinoids and terpenoids. So it's not just one plant, it's multiple plants, and all the extracts and oils can really differ
So
as well.
friends, like I'm quite connected. Like, I run a Facebook page documenting everything from many years ago, and I'm glad I did. I know quite a few families who are actually homegrown, so they
Yep.
know, or as
Yeah,
best
we're
as their
aware.
knowledge, what they're
Yes.
actually getting and ordering their seeds, etc.
Yep.
So for them to be able to help with your research, currently until the federal, because there's a federal offence to actually pop leaves and buds in the post.
Correct.
So until, do you have any time frame on when you think that change would happen to those families who want to get on board?
So that's what we're looking at doing, about how we work through the legal process. And it's possible. We just need to get this through, ethics committees, to then allow the government to give us the permission to be able to have the samples, store them, move them, and then we also have to go through the ethics issues around how we work with families who have got the product. So we've just got to sort out some of the science regulatory stuff, which is kind of taking us now.
We sense a willingness, it has to
Yeah.
be said, from New South Wales government
Yeah,
in this area. They're interested in the study. They'll work with us to try and find a way that, I mean, it's a complex ethical issue, but we can see a way around it.
And to date, because it's all state-based laws,
Yes.
so to date we've been working with New South Wales Health, but we are also keen, we're meeting with Queensland Health soon to see whether or not we can extend the project beyond New South Wales boundaries.
I've got another question. I note that a lot of the other states, Queensland just announced a trial, that they're going to be doing a trial, and Victoria announced something a couple of weeks ago. So is each state doing their own trial, and are they doing the same trial?
No, very good
It
question.
sounds like it's a bit of a race, who can get there first.
Oh, you picked up on that too. So up until...
Can New South Wales just please get there first?
So up until recently, everyone was, how do you run away from this question? And I think you'd agree, that was generally the politician's response, would have been, how do you run away from the question of medical cannabis? And now there's an understanding that this issue is relevant and the community understands it. I think that's really what's happened. We've reached that tipping point where now it's kind of the convergence of the science. When you saw, you want to put up those things, and what's the data tell us? That's all stuff that's been written about for the first time in the last 12 months. I mean, we don't have a lot of good studies going back 20, 30 years around CBD and epilepsy. So the science is new, the advocacy is new, the politicians getting their head around it is new. So I think what we're seeing, in the next 2 to 3 years will be major changes. And I think, people such as Andrew have been campaigning for years and not being able to have, their voices heard. I think, finally, there's now, there's progress, there's light at the end of the tunnel. As for how it's going to roll out, there's still a lot of, there's a lot more work to do. All we know is that the Commonwealth recently, so the one thing that they've said they will do is change the Act, the Narcotics Act, that will allow us to grow cannabis for a pharmaceutical industry without breaking the UN Convention. Why does that matter, the UN Convention? Because we break it whenever we want. And other countries have. It matters because we've got a big opium poppy industry in Australia, and if we breach the UN Convention on growing cannabis, we don't do that properly, that jeopardises a very big opium poppy industry. So you can see why the politicians and the farmers want to make sure this is going to be done properly. So that announcement's been made, and that's about it. We actually don't know exactly where we're going to be in 2, 3, 4 years' time. Are we going to be moving towards an Americanized model, which is kind of inverted commas medical cannabis, but it's really, there's not much medical in what's going on in the US. Doctors aren't involved. Doctors don't prescribe. Largely in the bigger jurisdictions. Do we go down the European model, which is much more doctors are involved, the medicines are more tightly controlled, there's standards, there's regulations around what can be grown and sold and so forth. So they're the debates I think we're kind of having over the next couple of years. And it's going to be important, I guess, for how does the community come along with that. I think we need to sort of also have an understanding, where do we want to be in 5 years' time? And how do you get there? But recognising that for some people 5 years is too long to wait. And so what do you set up in the interim? But the interim isn't necessarily where you want to end up, if that makes sense.
Another question, Karen.
How to register a medication. Nothing was really said about the side effects on the side of
Oh, yeah, it wasn't. That's a bit about safety, yeah.
I mean, the current side effects of the medication that we're throwing down our necks right now are practically just killing them slowly. I think they're probably just as evil as the seizures themselves. Yet the cannabis, from what I understand, has very little side effects. I mean, doesn't that come into
CBD is an incredibly safe medication, as I think Andrew said. I mean, the main hazards that I can see, very high doses might sedate a little bit, but not as much as your Epilepsy or your clobazam, or dazolam, or whatever.
The benzos.
Nothing. I mean, probably the main hazard is that it tends to interact at a liver level with other medications. So if you're on CBD and you're also taking Epilim or benzos, you can modify the blood levels, usually in an upwards direction. So you have to really watch the blood levels of a standard anticonvulsant medications quite carefully if you go on CBD.
In America, the system is set up very differently. I think with looking after people with epilepsy, like they seem to have regular blood tests, just on normal pharma. But here, maybe once a year.
There are some data on that, though. I mean, there are Epidiolex anticonvulsant interaction studies that have shown levels of different anticonvulsant medications going up with Epidiolex. It's just something to be aware of. It's not a party stopper or barbecue stopper.
But there's also that issue about if you had CBD, manufactured, which generally means extracted from a plant, and it's gone through a proper, process whereby it's being grown under the conditions that you want a medicine to be grown in, so that it doesn't have, horrible fungicides and other kinds of things. And so this is a thing they call GAP, Good Agricultural Practice. So, can we grow it well, to the standards we expect for future medicine, and then GMP, Good Manufacturing Practice, which is can you then actually make sure that all the extraction and all the processes are going to end up, that's done properly. They're not going to end up with, heavy metals, ethanol, a whole bunch of other stuff that, potentially could do without, or ideally.
But you can also make it in the lab, which is another important point. We've got synthetic CBD, we can make it in our chemistry department. It's quite, you take limonene, which is the smell of lemons, and do a bit of a chemical modification of it, giving up CBD. Similarly, CBD.
So if you've got the medicine, that's fine.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't think anyone's going to
I think
dispute
Carol wants us to
is
shut up.
CBD safe.
You warned me.
It's how do we make sure that when until we have the medicine,
We'll still be here at midnight.
Just two
having
more.
safe supply.
Two more questions. I've got two hands. Oh, I've got three hands up. But can we keep it reasonably short because there is an Epilepsy Action Board meeting that has to happen. Right up the back, first of all. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And thank you for having me for my first one. The question's a little bit personal. In the last 2 years, I've had 4 craniotomies for branching, and the start has caused them to develop epilepsy. Does medicinal cannabis help with that? So I'm on 5 drugs, 2 or 3 times a day. Some days they work and sometimes they don't. And when they don't, it's sort of very induced comas. So is this stuff have any, because one of the things that you can sell when you want to sell it to authorities is hope. You can't, one of the biggest frustration I have is the hopelessness that sort of traditional drugs don't seem to work at all. So you can't ride, you can't fly, and you go through all the things that strips your life. So my advice would be, if you're going to sell something, you can sell hope. And someone goes, gee, is that actually important? It's really important to me. Secondly, it's my personal question. You think this stuff might help me? Because try it.
Very quick answer.
I was going to say, I'm wondering whether on individual, whether you'd be willing to have a chat. I've got this feeling that these fellas might not get out of here. Will the other...
Can I quickly though, because the general principle, because this is a common issue that comes up. So I've got, either me or my friend or my son, my daughter, my cousin, whatever. Will it work for me? Now, how do you interpret research that we produce? Because what the research will say, 60% of people in this group got better compared to 40% in that group. So then we'll say drug A worked better than drug B. On a whole, as a general, 60 versus 40, A's better than B. But if you're part of that 40% that drug B worked for, as far as you're concerned, it worked. So at the end of the day, randomised trials, those big studies are important to get drugs licensed. At the end of the day, will it work for you? There's only one way of knowing that, and is that when you take the medicine, is it going to have is it going to improve the quality of your life? So that's always the complexity. The studies are important. They give us a guide. They allow us to talk in terms of chances are, probability is, But at the end of the day, until you try a medicine, and this is for all medicines, until you try it, you actually won't know what are the side effects for me. Did it work for me?
There's no reason, if it works for children, that it should work for adults.
Okay, I do need to call this to a halt. I hope you will agree this has been an amazing session. When I asked the fellas here, when I actually asked Nick, Ian, Jonathan, David, would you like to speak? They said, yes, all 4 of us would like to speak and we can do it for hours. So, having said that, perhaps a couple of you might like to, that you had questions outstanding, might like to come and have a word because we do need to move out of the room. Just a couple of things to finish up. The Minister's Office has let us know that they've now set live a medicinal cannabis hotline for New South Wales. 1800 217 257. We'll actually put that on our Facebook page as well and keep everybody aware of that, but that's now live. Yes, certainly, 1800 217 257. The other thing is Epilepsy Action Australia publishes a fairly regular newsletter, Medcan, M-E-D-C-A-N. If you haven't registered for it, do. Just contact us any way you would normally, Facebook, email, phone, and we'll be making sure that people are kept up to date with what's happening. Again, thank you to all of the speakers. I think, Nick, Ian, fascinating stuff, and we're just so happy to be working with you on it. It's a true privilege. Michelle, you're a legend. You know what we think of you. You're an absolute legend and a courageous lady. We are caring of the families who are already using medicinal cannabis, and we're also, caring for those families who haven't yet. And we hope to serve you in whichever way we can. Thank you for coming today, and we'll certainly be staying in touch. Thank you.